mine, and I work at the Center for Science and Environment, as you know. And I'd like to really welcome all of you and my amazing group of food lovers, chefs, bloggers who are joining this webinar today. And of course, our very special Vibha Varshne, who, as you know, has been curating and putting together these amazing books that CSC does called First Food. Now, before I ask everyone to speak and I ask Vibha to make a short presentation, just a few words from my side in terms of why are we doing this? Because, you know us, we're an environmental group. We work on all the bad sides of environment, from pollution to toxification to, to waste to, to all that. So why a book on food? Why a book on food recipes? And this is our fourth in the series called First Food. The reason is very clear. And let me tell you our two key reasons why we do this and why today's webinar is so special for us as well. Firstly, as environmentalists, we very strongly believe that if we talk about biodiversity in the wild, you cannot protect it unless you treasure the biodiversity on your plate. The fact is, India has this incredibly diverse biodiversity, what we call this, the diversity, the ecological diversity, the cultural diversity of India. But the cultural and the food diversity of India is also rooted on the biological diversity of India. Each region was eating different foods because of the biological diversity. Now, today we talk very much about conservation and about protecting these species in the wild. But the fact is, unless we understand those species, unless we treasure those species, and unless we enjoy the species on our plates, we will not see them protected. So that's one key linkage for us. The other one for us very clearly is that, as you know, we at CSC have been doing a lot of work on the whole question about toxification of food. We tested pesticides in food many years ago. We have been raising the whole issue about what would it take to grow food which is not bad for our health. We also have had this huge campaign to try and put food labeling so that you can actually do labeling of salt, sugar, fat on the food. So essentially linking food with nutrition. Now, this is the other connection that is very important for us, that the food nutrition connection, the food livelihood connection. And with this comes the whole issue of climate change, which Vibha will talk about today, because this fourth book that we have done now, called The Future of Taste, is really a book in which Vibha has very carefully curated food which is resilient. And that's particularly important in an age of climate change. Now, we know millets are important for that reason, because millets are the most water-prudent crop. And so you can reduce your use of water and get nutrition. But there are many others like this. What do we know about them? How do we introduce them in our diets? And that's really why why this webinar is so important and so unique. Because the group of people, and I will introduce them as I call upon them to speak, this group of people is very special. They are food lovers. They bring you food on your table, but they have made a very deliberate effort to make sure that they can bring food with a difference. And it's tough, because it's easy to fall into the trap of producing food that you believe everybody loves. I mean, McDonald's, everybody loves it, might as well produce that same kind of food. So how have they taken this journey? What have they learned? And how can they be part of this bigger message that we have and our book that we have put out? That's really what this webinar is about. And I hope all of you will enjoy it as much as I think I will. So as we begin, let me ask my colleague Vibha to give us a short overview of the book and this fourth in the series. And again, it's really something that Vibha has single-handedly put together. So thank you, Vibha, and please go ahead. And then I will call upon each person to speak.
Okay, thank you, Sunita ji, and thank you everyone for joining us for the webinar. I will put the book slightly in context. So there is a reason why we eat what we eat. Our grandparents depended on the local biodiversity for food. There were plenty of choices when the weather was good, but there was also something that they would grow and they could forage even when the weather was bad, when there were droughts and there was extreme rain and floods. So these foods were called survival foods. These foods have become uh, important once again in the context of climate change. For example, water-prooted millets is a good example of such foods. But there are many, many more other foods that we need to talk about, which is what the book has in our, the latest book has. So this latest publication first is the fourth in the first food series, and it explores ingredients that would help us survive the vagaries of weather. So let me start my presentation. It's a very brief one. Just a minute.
Do you need help, Vibha?
Yes. Can you share this?
सुकन्या वो प्रेजेंटेशन शेयर कर लो.
Sure.
Sorry, I don't know. There was another window coming that I had no idea what that was doing there.
No problem. No problem. Let Sukanya quickly share it.
Thank you, Sukanya. So I will start with what the book has. So it's the fourth book in the first food series, and it has stories about more than 50 ingredients that are suited to the extreme weather that we are regularly seeing more and more now. We have put down more than 100 recipes prepared from these ingredients. These are easy to follow and provide choices for breakfast, meals, sweets, beverages, and even pickles and chutneys. Keeping in mind that millets are being promoted globally, we have asked 9 very well-known cuisinaires to share their millet recipes. And not only these, we have articles from 5 experts from across the country who have monitored the impact of climate change on biodiversity and how it will affect the food on our plate. Next slide, Sukanya. So just to put in context, so the existing food system where we find that it is very convoluted. For example, extreme weather events such as hail, untimely rains, drought, and pathogens wreak havoc on our field. But it is this very food system which is responsible for as much as a quarter of global greenhouse gases, which disturb this delicate balance that govern the weather. The situation becomes grimmer when we think about, when we look at how agriculture and climate change both are impacting the country's unique biodiversity. Food systems have been identified as one of the biggest drivers of biodiversity loss, and they can cause as much as 70% of biodiversity loss on land and 50% in the fresh water that we also consume, fish and everything. So studies have shown that nutritive value of foods have also gone down because of climate change. A study by NIN showed that it was affecting the nutritive value of staples such as wheat, barley, and even pulses. For example, in case of whole masoor, the protein content, which is why people actually consume the pulses, that has gone down by more than 10%. So what we need to do is to reduce emissions by being mindful about what we eat. We need to ease the pressure from cultivated foods, and we have to bring the biodiversity back into our plates. But what is also important is that we preserve the knowledge about these foods and how this biodiversity can be actually used. Sukanya, next slide. So the good thing is that in India, we still have retained this knowledge. India has as much as 11% of the world's plant species, and we have a rich tradition of using this biodiversity as food. These plants are part of our festivals, religious ceremonies, and we use them as medicine also. We are all actually the holders of this knowledge, but we often fail to use this knowledge because these ingredients are not available in formal markets. Sukanya, next slide. So these are the 4 books that we have done. So we have tried to document all this knowledge that is available in far-flung places in the country into this series. So in these 4 books, I think we have more than around 150 ingredients, and we have more than 400 recipes using these ingredients. We have provided recipes from the communities themselves. And the first one, which we published in 2013, talked about the linkages of how these ingredients are still part of our meals in each day. The second book, Culture of Taste, was published in 2017, and it shows how communities use each and every part of the plant to make different kinds of meals, and like the intelligence that they use to ensure that they had something or the other to consume at all times whenever it was available. For example, sometimes the flour would be available, sometimes the fruit would be available, or young fresh leaves could be also consumed. The third book, Business of Taste, in this we went in deep to understand the business of good food and how communities are benefiting from cultivating and collecting these ingredients. Now, this 4th book, Future of Taste, explores food that could help us survive in a climate risk world. Sukanya, next slide. So, this book is a primer how to survive the food shortages brought in by the uncertainties of extreme weather. We show that these foods are not limited to millets. Many of these plants grow outside agricultural land in wetlands, ponds, forests, and degraded lands. Many are weeds that are actually thrown out of the agricultural fields, and some are perennial tree crops, tree foods, which are collected whenever they are available. Others are medicinal plants which people incorporate into their diets daily for their health benefits. They can all help us adapt to this changing weather. We see that we cannot endanger biodiversity and then worry about climate change. We have to actually preserve the biodiversity. Suganya, next slide. So why are we having this conversation? The discussion is important because influencers like the ones on our panel, they are chefs, they are writers, they are bloggers. They can guide changes in the diet. And we find that we all need to work together to ensure that connections between food, nutrition, and nature are retained. We need to rediscover first food. So that's what the effort is here in this webinar. Thank you, Sukanya, and ma'am, you can take over.
Thank you, Vibha. Thank you so much for this effort that you make. And you have to all understand, Vibha cooks all this food, and we photograph it all internally. So it's a really homegrown thing, and I hope you all enjoy it. Manu, if I may call upon you first. Manu Chandra is someone who is a very well-known restaurateur. He is a chef, and he runs Lupa. And most importantly, he likes to experiment with the food that he serves. And from what I understand, Manu, that you have used some of the ingredients we talk about, the recipes. And so what we wanted to hear from you is really your experience as someone who has deliberately tried to influence what people eat and serve different food. How has it worked? Manu.
Well, hey, firstly, thank you for having me on this panel. I feel very honored. And of course, this is something that has been very close to my heart and I've spoken about across, many years. But am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. And I mean, it's been a long journey. So I perhaps should start from the beginning.
Manu, you've disappeared. You were audible, but now
Disappeared.
something. I think you have a loose connection or something.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yes.
Oh, great. So it started around 2005 when I was setting up my first restaurant in Bangalore, and essentially looking at doing Western food, but I realized very quickly that it was very different from working in a city like New York because the availability of ingredients for the sort of cuisine that I was trying to do is very scant. And I think the natural progression at that point was to try to look inward and not look outward in being able to put across food which would excite the customer. I mean, that was a challenge, I will admit, because putting local ingredients on the menu and then trying to put them, cook them in a Western way was a little daunting initially because the customer wasn't as receptive. Their idea of coming to a fine dining restaurant was that they would only see exotic ingredients as exotic was seen then, right? As you say, English vegetables, as they commonly called. But I think I kind of persevered with the idea of trying to use as much of local ingredients and biodiversity that was available at the point and start amalgamating it into our menus in interesting forms. And I think the first edition of the book has a recipe or two from there as well, where we do bathua, which is something that I grew up with in Delhi,
Yes.
and it was ubiquitous in our household because it would be turned into so many products. And I realized very soon that it basically didn't appear on any menu in restaurants. And we started with that and then just built from there. And be it raw jackfruit coming onto a Western menu, and then many years later, working alongside the then agricultural minister of Karnataka, who was also a bit of a technocrat, Krishna Gowda, and kickstarting the whole millets, awareness campaign out of one of the restaurants. This was about 9 years ago, I think. I think well before it became a lot more mainstream. So it's been an amazing journey, and I think I'm very heartened to see that awareness in general has grown many-fold, and I feel very very satisfied with the fact that restaurants and chefs can be conduits, towards that change in some way. But I also realized, in relatively short time that any endeavor to try to change the eating habits of a country that's growing as fast as we are is something that takes time, and it's something that takes patience. And then you have to keep, sort of trudging on and propagating the so-called gospel of biodiversity before people start actually being a lot more aware. So with millets too, for example, something that started actually 9 years ago, almost 9 years ago, has taken almost that long for it to even become a talking point in any meaningful way.
No, good. Thank you, Manu, and thank you for this. So, as you will see on the screen, we have 3 chefs and we have 3 real bloggers, experts, people who are foraging for food and talking about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call one chef and then one blogger, food expert, and then another chef. So we're going to go around, and I'm hoping we'll get another chance, a second round as well. So Sangeeta, if I may call upon you, Sangeeta Khanna. Sangeeta is somebody who we have known for a long time. So thank you, Sangeeta, for joining us again on this. She's a nutrition and culinary consultant with a focus on nature, holistic nutrition, and food systems. And you've really been traveling all over India to make these connections and join the dots. So your journey, Sangeeta, and what have you learned? And what do you think we should do more? Really like to hear from you on that, Sangeeta. Sangeeta, not audible. I think you're on mute. Just unmute yourself. No. It's still on mute. Now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me in this discussion. Lovely to be speaking in presence of all of you. I know all of you and have met, except Chef Tizak and Manu, I've met everyone. That's yeah. So yeah, I've spoken to the two illustrious chefs as well. Anumitra is a friend. So I am speaking to friends basically, and it's a wonderful feeling to be contributing, even if a little bit. Yes, this topic is very dear to my heart. When the first book edition came, I was so excited, and I was already writing about all of these foods and started contributing to Down to Earth as well soon after. And it has been a very enriching journey. I must admit here that while writing for Down to Earth, I learned the rigor of, bringing all the information that a regular reader needs. Before that, I kind of assumed that people know it, because in my family, we did use a lot of foraged foods. My grandmother was one person who would, call random people and arrange stuff. And she knew how these things should be cooked. She knew almost everything, how things should be cooked. She would have been around 120 years if she was alive. She lived a full life of 107 years. So imagine the kind of exposure she had, and the way she lived in different ages. For us, the world has changed even within 20, 30 years. Regarding all of that knowledge that we have lost, the kind of, I realize that the kind of knowledge, the kind of experience, and that instinctive usage of ingredients that generation had, we have lost it. We don't know how to utilize, even if we know, something is edible. We have a inherent fear of using plants that we forage, or vegetables that we don't know. A lot of times people ask me questions. Is it not poisonous? How do you know it is edible? How do you cook with it? The last question. The first question is it not poisonous? Would it not kill me? Would it not cause allergies? So that fear has come for nature, and that is very, disturbing. The other thing that I feel is that even after trying to forage and trying to use traditional foraged food, I know so little. Even for this bathua, I used to think, bathua grows all over North India, on the roadsides, everywhere, all the seasons, all through the year. We see different varieties of bathua sprouting up. And I used to think, why don't we use it? And I used to ask locals, aap isko nahi banate hai? And they would say, no. And I tried to forage and cook that roadside bathua. It did not taste like what it is when we get it from either the wheat fields or from the market. The reason I discovered much later in a village of Rajasthan, where a 20-something girl told me, we don't eat it in the summers because it is bitter. And then I started looking up why it is bitter in the summers. It has so much oxalic acid concentration in the summers that it is inedible. We should not be consuming it in summers, even if it grows profusely. So that knowledge that people have inherited, we are losing out, and we need to preserve it. We need to celebrate all of it. Whatever festivals we've had, we cooked certain things, we need to bring it back. I myself have stopped celebrating festivals, and I'm guilty of it. And I think we should start, chefs should start doing it, should start doing pop-ups. I feel like doing a few things, just as a responsibility of continuing this uh, uh, wisdom. This is a wisdom we are losing out, and a lot of other things like this chenopodium, this amaranthus family can be one of the major foods in any crisis. It can survive anywhere. Chenopodium and amaranthus both, many members survive. They can grow anywhere, and their seeds can stay alive, can sprout again even for a century. Imagine that kind of resilience that these plants have, and we have lost the knowledge of the sensibility of how to use it. I don't know whether you all know the bathua seeds are also edible. And in mountain communities, bethu, it's called bethu seeds, and it looks like quinoa or amaranth. And a German guy sitting in Nagar, a village in Himachal, he's selling it like German quinoa. It's not tasty. And there's a method of using it. There's a method of using it that only the Dogras of Jammu know, or the real mountain people know. You have to soak it and wash it several times until the milky water washes off. That is the way oxalic acid, which is water soluble, is washed off. You should not be eating it without soaking and washing it off. So where would we get to know? We won't be able to find it in books, on the internet. We need to meet those people, meet older peoples, and bring their knowledge on the table. Otherwise, we'll get sick of eating this kind of food, and we'll be again scared of it forever.
Good
So I
point.
think to
Good point, Sangeeta. No, very good point, because the point of knowledge is so important. Because again, the biodiversity conservation movement is really about preserving knowledge. But again, the knowledge of what we eat, why we eat, and how we eat,
and
it's
when.
really connected to the food, the biodiversity, the plant, and really we can't have one without the other. So I think that point is so valid. But let me move on, and I will try and come back. Thomas Zacharias, if I may bring Thomas in now. Thomas is again a chef, but a chef with a passion for food and sustainable eating in India. He has a platform called Lakavor, and has been doing a lot of work to bring this knowledge to people. So, Thomas, tell us a little bit about your experience. And also, again, as the question I'm asking is both your experience, but also what you feel we should do more of. And how did you find our book that Vibha sent? Would that be of use? Thomas, please.
Thank you, Sunita and Vibha, and good afternoon to all of you. It's nice to see so many familiar faces who are, in a lot of ways, doing path-breaking work in this area. Um, I think I've been a chef for close to 15 years, and a large part of that, about 7 of those years, was spent at a restaurant called the Bombay Canteen in Mumbai, where we highlighted local regional food, indigenous ingredients, seasonality. In fact, I had a self-imposed rule as a chef that I wouldn't use anything that's non-native or non-indigenous to communities today. And by virtue of doing that, I highlighted about 160 different vegetables on the restaurant's menu. And again, not just featuring them on the menu, but doing the work, doing the storytelling, training the staff to be able to make these dishes stand out as being popular and exciting for people. And it's again lovely to see, like Chef Manu said, that I think consumers and the general audience today has uh, kind of warmed up to the idea of going back to some of these ingredients again. Um, Through the course of being the chef of the Bombay Canyon, I also traveled pretty extensively around India. and I've now been to about 25 states in the country. What I realized as a chef was that there is also a lot of work happening at the grassroots level by organizations, by FPOs, by food brands to solve a lot of these deep-rooted challenges. And somehow everyone is kind of working towards the same mission, but working in their own silos. So that coupled with the fact that as a chef, I realized I was working in a silo myself and trying to do this is why I left the Bombay canteen to start the Locavore. So the Locavore stands for someone who tries to consume locally and responsibly as much as possible. And the idea behind the Locavore is to build something that's one collaborative, so that we are not working in silos anymore, that we can bring together synergies of what we all do, and also I think push the boundaries and bring in some amount of creativity in being able to do so. I think for the longest time, a lot of the measures to combat some of this has been very repetitive and archaic. And I think today, because the challenges are so much more complex, we do need creative solutions. So what we do at the Locavore is we do storytelling combined with events on ground. We take on social impact projects. We do food travel experiences. In fact, I'm right now in Rajasthan doing a recce to actually bring 25 people next month and take them across Rajasthan, showcasing local ingredients, indigenous ingredients, and getting them to meet with local communities and so forth. So I think one part of it is obviously the rediscovery and documentation of these ingredients, which again First Food has been doing, and CSE has been doing so beautifully. I must commend you on the work that you're doing. I've been again a fan of the books for ever since you first started it, and it's really um, we really need a lot more of that. In fact, just last year, we at the Locavore we undertook a project to document indigenous wild foods from Palghar district in Maharashtra during the monsoons. And that itself took 3 months to do, to create recipes. We had a team of 20 people. And so I'm sure there's a lot of work that Vibha and her team puts in. So I really commend you for that. And again, I mean, I got into cooking at a time when a lot of this information wasn't available. There was no social media. There weren't so many people working at the forefront and championing these. So I think we live in a very different time now where we do have the tools to be able to get this message out there and get more people to adopt local ingredients and not just promote them but celebrate them.
Yeah.
So in addition to documentation, education is also important, but also innovative ideas on getting these to the table. I think, for example, food travel experiences are a great way. Next month we're trying to put together an immersive experience that incorporates virtual reality to create in Mumbai to create an experience for guests to understand some of these climate change related issues and then tie it back to a meal that they will have at the end. So, using technology smartly. And I think, I know that uh, millets have been a part of, our heritage for a long time. And, but just, I mean, one of the observations I had was it took the government 1 year to completely change consumer behavior around millets in India, which just shows the power also of policy and political agenda and how that can play an impact on a lot of these issues. I can keep going, but I think I've
No, very good
said enough.
point, Thomas. I mean, very clear that we need to drive the policy, but culture of food is really something that all of you determine, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, food has to be something that people enjoy, and it has to be exciting, and that's how the culture changes. Shruti, your work. Shruti Tharyal is the founder of Forgotten Greens. In fact, you're on a cycle ride, I'm told right now, going through South India, documenting a lot of these forgotten greens and bringing them to people's table. Shruti, I mean, we can all get lost in our world thinking that we've kind of cracked it. Yet, if you look at all data, in India, we are still eating the kind of worst foods possible. And all our nutrition is showing us that we're not turning the tide. So, in your experience, what has really worked? And what, I want to push you a little bit, Shruti, on this. I mean, your work is amazing. Please talk about it. But also, what do you think we should do more?
Thank you, Sunita. And thank you for inviting me to this panel. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. For me, I think what the shift that happened for me was I grew up. I'm a Malayali who grew up in Maharashtra. I grew up with stories of ingredients. My parents would talk about that, we get in our village, which we don't get in Maharashtra. And also there was an upward mobility for our community. So there was a lot of shame eating. I come from a community that foraged, but there's a lot of shame around eating forest food because, we have to mobilize upward. We have to move upward. And that upward mobility meant going and buying what others eat, and others eat carrots and cabbage and all these tomatoes and potatoes and food that we get every time. Yeah, non-seasonal foods. And for me, it didn't make sense that, why would we all of us eating the same food? And the whole, I saw my parents yearning for those ingredients. And that's how I think I started my journey also, because I was curious about what these seasonal foods were back from my homeland. And I think that constant aspiration is what, when we, that constant aspiration is what makes, at least like people from my community, not wanting to eat diverse ingredients and go and eat the same ingredients that, is being sold to us in the market or sold to us through media. And I think Sangeeta said this, the disconnect from nature. When I was, the schooling also that I went through, my schooling taught me that nature is separate from me. I'm not supposed to play with plants. Most of them are poisonous. Most of them are thorny. You should not be around them. The playground was this cleared land where we should play, and no, we should not go anywhere close to plants. And that also didn't make sense because kids are supposed to play with plants. I would have, and I remember feeling so attracted to some of the plants, the plants that get milky sap when in the berries and stuff, but those were just not allowed to go there. So I think when we for example, CSE's work, the book is one of the ways to break that shame, to say that, to break that narrative and to get these ingredients in a book for people to see that book and to take that and to read it and understand that ingredients that like these that were consumed in my village are fashionable and it's okay to eat them. And that fashion, and I think through my work also, I've had people messaging me, the plant that you're talking about on Instagram is something my grandmom used to, has cooked when I was 5-year-old. And for them, seeing that ingredient on Instagram as a post is making it fashionable again. And I think that's what we need to keep doing. We need to bring these ingredients back into, we need to trend, we need to trend them. We need to bring them back into the trend, and we need to bring them back through books, through, through our work, through social media platforms. And I think that's the push that we need to do.
Very good point, Shruti. And that's really why this conversation, and in some senses the work of the chefs, is so important, because when they bring it on the plate and they serve it in their restaurant and they do it at their They're famous people. I mean, you're very famous people. Anumitra is one I'm going to call upon now. And Anumitra is somebody I'm trying to get back to Delhi because I really miss her restaurant and her food when she used to be in Delhi, and she's run away to Bangalore and Goa and everywhere else. Anumitra is a chef. She's a restaurateur. She does edible archives and Bento Bento and Yo Colombo. And those are your restaurants. But really, for us, you've been that extraordinary person who has made the journey to put a lot of this onto people's tables. So your experience with this, Anumitra.
Thank you for calling me, Sunita. Thank you, Vibha. And I have been reading, I have stopped reading newspaper, but still I read down to earth. That's the only one magazine that I subscribe to. I'll just come back to the point. When I left my job in Delhi and I moved to, I started working on my own. One of the major move that I wanted to do is instead of working as a chef, which is little bit constrained by all the other elements of business, I wanted to make it a practice oriented thing where cooking consciously and intentionality of cooking becomes very important. What I want to cook, what I want to serve, what each elements of this are more important than what market wants me to do. That's why I just thought I want to do edible archives, that from the name it doesn't sound like a restaurant, and it's between all these kind of thing, and it's a practice oriented thing. So we also try to also get into the point that how many things that we are sourcing, that we know where it is coming from. So I just say very when I talk to my guest, I say that whatever rice you're eating, I know who has grown this. The salt you are the salt I have used, I have collected it from the salt pans in around Goa. So that's the whole practice is around that. We grow some of our vegetables. Now we have realized that vegetable growing is not easy, so we have many collaborations, and we know which farm what they are growing, and completely dependent on seasonality, and we do only seasonal menu, and season is changing. Season is not one thing. Some days our seasonal menu change in say our some winter kind of a menu in Goa change in March. This year February, now it's hot and the season is also already moving. Similarly, we try to also do few things tuber is one of the crops that is grown a lot in the Western Ghats. Like Shruti was also part of one of we did a workshop and a residency together. We now take a form of residency where we take few people, where we are doing very we go deep into the idea. So everybody is, whoever is there, they carry the same intensity. It's not just eating is just one part of the event, but when you are just doing that, everybody carries the same idea. So one of the things that we have popularized in Goa, say there is a ingredient called this thing which called madi in Goa, and in Karnataka it's called murli. It's basically a huge a tuber. So that's one of my best selling dish in my Goa restaurant, is a layered cutlet with that. So these are the small achievement, and it takes a long time. People first are very apprehensive. They say that what is this? And then when it gets popular, people know, okay, word of mouth, somebody else told them, and then it becomes popular. This is the 4th year, and now finally it is my best selling dish of the the vegetarian thing. And we do a lot of vegetarian things. I'll just mention a little bit about Sunita's introduction of this book, which is I think very, very important part, where you are talking also about the whole of like meat eating culture. And like it's meat eating in India, it's complicated. It's like it's political, it's complicated right now. It's like we can't only see it from one point. Like in the US, the meat eating, and in India, when you change the places, it completely changed the idea of sustainability. But it's so important that actually traditionally we have been eating so many different things, and one meat, one fish on the plate, that traditionally in India. And now this whole like idea of like also having a main meat and then some other ingredients, these are all our way of eating, which is all important, that how we understand like how we understand our food, which is actually climate resilience. Like these are also the points, that how we eat, everybody has their commitment like to this, and every day we can make change, because every day we are eating. And like good food, I follow Sangeeta's work also very closely. Like you can do so many things with like little bit of greens, your favorite eggs. Like I just see, like, so like egg is like also like just a boiled egg can be nutritious. You don't need to do many fancy things with that. Like, but the food is also about nutrition. Food is also about the goodness of body, and also the nature, and being conscious around it, and in being intentional around food and eating is the major thing I want to share.
Such good points. I mean, each one of you has really hit the nail on the head in terms of knowledge, in terms of connecting, in terms of bringing it on the plate, and in terms of being wise about your food choices. Really, I mean, those are such important issues. But before I open it up again, Sheetal, your work is really unique. I mean, fascinated to hear that you, I mean, when in terms of your work on looking at the Gujarati cuisine itself and really going deep into it and working on it and bringing it to light, what has your experience been like on that?
Hello, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here amongst all of you. And because I remember in 2014, when I started documenting Gujarati cuisine, a well-wisher gifted us the first edition of the first food book. And here I am being part of the panel, such esteemed panel on the occasion of the fourth book. So it's an honor, really. So I started documenting Gujarati foods because a lot of Gujaratis were frowning upon our own cuisine. You know, we are somebody who prefers to eat thepla in Paris and panini and pasta for dinner at home. So I just wanted to, start people honoring the practice of eating khichdi curry for dinner, and the varieties of curries that Gujarat has to offer. So nobody knows what, even Gujaratis don't know what other regional Gujarati foods are. And somewhere I wanted to start documenting those foods and talk about the joys of cooking, the way women or homemakers used to cook, and the way the kitchens function, the whole idea of having a well-oiled kitchen functioning, churning out meals, 2-3 meals a day. And that was the reason I started the Route to Roots journey. But it's steered in a way very organically towards the rural foods and the forage foods and all of those kinds of food practices. I'm currently very actively documenting the tribal foods of Gujarat, and what pains me is the way we are losing all of these greens that we're talking about, to the way the farming practices have been shifting, the way the climate change is impacting the growth of a lot of indigenous greens, and even if the homemakers or people who would want to cook, but they wouldn't have those greens to cook with in, say, coming 10-15 years, because the excess use of weedicide and excess use of fertilizers is literally killing all those heirloom seeds, or deshi, as we call deshi biyaran, where we are losing it at a very very rampant speed, along with the loss of knowledge, because we aren't treasuring our custodians, we aren't treasuring those information holders, for us, maybe native is a good term, but deshi isn't, in a literal way, because they don't feel appreciated enough. They don't see that there is a need to hold on to our knowledge that we have. So most of, even in India, if you understand, the tribal communities are the last custodians. If they are holding on to some their green, their flora, fauna, their information, it is we can at least believe that those things would those information and practices would survive. But once they start giving up, I don't know what we are up for next, because you see, I'm not against those fast food things, but you see pani puris, bhel puri, and bhaji pav entering those remote areas. People finding foods that they see on their social media screen more edible than what they have on their plate. So I'm trying to talk about all these things through the Route to Roots, and through this entire journey, trying to voice what is necessary, trying to connect the dots, and somewhere trigger that appreciation for their own cuisine amongst the tribal communities that we are currently documenting cuisines of. Because they just ask, why are you here? What is the need? And their cuisine has never felt appreciated. And now that we need that support, we are just going back to them to understand what they eat, how they eat. Somewhere we are selfish, but that is, we need all that selfishness or that selflessness has to be there in trying to convince them to hold on to whatever their knowledge base is. More in question answers.
Important, Sheetal. I mean, I think the whole, for me also, the whole question about giving pride back to people in their own cuisine. And for that, at least from our point of view, from Vibha and me, the biggest issue is to give the logic back. Because one of the key reasons for, you can have a cultural pride, but the reason why you did something, why you ate that food, the seasonality of that food, the importance of that in terms of the wild, that connections, I think we are all making. I mean, I can hear it from all of you. And I think that's powerful, because the narrative is important. It's not just saying that, it's not a marketing gimmick. It's really changing the narrative and getting people a pride back in their food. So one question I have from Preeti Mundra, which I wanted to take, and then I want to give all of you time for quick things that you want to add before I wrap up. So Preeti is from Smaller Footprint, and she's saying they help people on sustainable living. And there are two questions. Is one, on the whole question about using entire plants as much as possible, as using peels of gourds for making chutney. There's another view that we should not be consuming them because they're hard to digest. Would anyone like to take this on? I know my colleague Richard is the best on this because he uses every bit of the peel, but anyone would like to take on your favorite recipe in making chutneys from peels and how that has worked out? Thomas, Manu, Anumitra, Sheetal, anyone, please.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Manu, please go ahead, then I'll ask Sheetal. Just please.
No, so there was one recipe that I came across through one of my Bengali employees many years ago, and then it kind of made it onto our menus, especially for the catering business. It features very prominently, and that was made with plantain skin. And they do it with shorshe, and they do it with a little chili, fairly standard, Bengali recipe in that sense. But they kind of char it on an open flame and then make a paste out of it. It's absolutely delicious. In fact, I think it's way more delicious than plantain. And we serve it with a plantain kebab, so it works really well. You're using the entire vegetable or fruit in this case, in its entirety for one recipe. It works really well.
Sheetal, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, Gujarati cuisine as such celebrates a lot of, it's no waste kitchen. So we cook a lot with the rich, mostly all gourd chutneys. Then they go into the mutias that we steam. Even with the ripe mango skins, we make curries out of it. So a lot of, inherently, we've been using a lot of skins.
So I think you're getting your answer that, just learn the knowledge, the skill, and go ahead, Sangeeta. And there's also another question for you, Sangeeta, from Preeti, which is on Bathua is bitter in summer, highlighting the seasonality. Essentially, the point she's making is, how do we get that knowledge? Because if we don't have it, then we can really go wrong. And she talks about watermelons in summer, not refrigerated. How do we avoid or handle that if it's not winter food, summer food? Sangeeta.
Yeah, I think the best way is to talk to our grandmothers and each one's grandmothers. There has to be a community of elder people who are ready to talk. They are ready to talk always. We have to give them that space and respect, and they will give us all the treasure that they hold. I keep traveling to remote places, and I make it a point that I talk to the vendors, I talk to the sabziwalas and sagwalas. Just last week, we were driving from Dehradun to a village, and I found someone with a that plastic sack जिसको कट्टा बोलते हैं, उसके अंदर he was selling watercress. Now watercress in India is found only in the mountain ranges, like the foothills. It's a aquatic mustard family plant, and it's so tasty. And it's not easily found in Dehradun also now because water bodies are polluted and people don't want to eat it. There's only 1 or 2 rivers. So this guy, I started talking. I told him how much you have. He had actually a lot. He had around 20 kilos. I bought 2 kilos. Okay. And I asked him, "Aap isko kaise pakate ho?" So I think the best way is to ask these foragers and to buy from them. Even if I have to distribute it, I make it a point that I buy, because as long as they have the customers, they'll keep bringing that stuff. There used to be only one cycle guy who would bring this watercress from the water bodies. There's only one river, Song River, which is cleaner, and they bring it from there. So this guy told me a recipe, and then I talked to another person about a recipe. I mean, seeing my excitedness, they'll say, "Okay, ये तो हमारे गांव में कोई भी नहीं खाता है." People have stopped, villagers have stopped eating these things because it takes time to, and it is considered dirty. It is not coming from the market. Something that you buy from the market, even if it is loaded with chemicals and synthetic colors, it is good. And if it is coming from a water body in your backyard, it is not good. It is not clean. Pani mein hai, ganda hai, ditch mein hai, this and that. So it is not clean. So this, fear and this feeling of impurity towards nature, even in my Delhi homes, I've lived in 2 homes in Delhi, and all my neighbors have called my yard ganda because there are leaves, there's mulch on it. I mulch my garden. And a lot of my malis, the gardeners that I employ, they will be bent upon sweeping it. Their only work they know they want to do is sweeping, cleaning the floor, not doing any plant work. So that sense of dirty and clean, that we need to basically correct in our own mind. The second thing is we have to make a connection with the older generations. Wherever we go, we must be talking to the older people, whoever. Otherwise, we'll be living in a bubble and we'll forget everything. We'll disconnect ourselves from everything else. Regarding the peels, I wanted to say that, like Manu said, charred banana peel, the mineral composition is gold. It is so good. And all these minerals are so good for the body, and it alkalizes.
Yeah.
There are peels that are really, really good for you. What mistake people have started doing is they start eating only the peels, like only roti made of bran and some vegetable, and the endosperm part removed. That becomes a problem. That becomes a problem. We have to include, we have to eat the whole thing, but not just the peel. So maybe we have to be a little cautious as well when practicing these things.
It's again back to knowledge, back to knowledge. So as I end this, I want to give every one of you a few minutes to reflect on anything that you want to highlight. But more than that, I really want to see. So, if any one of you read the chat as while our talk has been going on, you would have seen what a lot of excitement there is. It's incredible. I mean, there are people here from all over. I saw that there was somebody here from Turkey who is joining us from Istanbul. There are many others talking about their work. And I think there's huge excitement about what you are all talking about, what you're all saying, what you're all doing. And I just wondered how this work, this journey of yours, not to sort of, obviously you're doing everything in your own individual field. Is there somewhere that people can find out more about this? We have shared your Instagram handles. You're all very popular. Everybody knows you. Your heroes, your people, everyone follows. But is there anything else that you feel we could do more of? Any advice that you have to Vibha? I'm always looking for pushing Vibha to do much more. So anything that you feel that should be done more? Thomas, please.
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, it's been lovely listening to all of you. I think I mean it's really important to have these sessions where we all come together and address these issues. But like you're alluding, Sunita, I think beyond these sessions there needs to be action that happens. And again, how can even like say the six of us on this panel collaborate and work together moving forward is something that we should figure out. And I'm happy to take this conversation offline and see how that's possible. But like, how do we, again, we're all still working in our own silos for the large part. So how do we get out of that and collaborate? How do we support each other's work, promote each other's work? Because ultimately the mission is the same for all of us or it's at least we have the same North Star. So that's something that, I mean, how do we translate conversation to action is something that I'd love to explore.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I have a slightly more, a holistic view of this and have had for a very long time. And I'd like to try to stand on top of a mountain and scream about this. See, I mean, you could not deny the fact that we're headed towards, very, very fast towards the monoculture. And it's not any different to what's happened globally. We're just following the same footsteps, and it's bound to happen in any developing country. We need to be acutely aware of that. How do you break from that cycle, essentially, should be the question that needs to be answered, and requires a lot more political will. It needs a lot more discussion at a governmental level. And I think think tanks, experts need to contribute in a very large way, because we are homogenized and we will continue to be more and more homogenized in that monoculture setup as time goes by. Sangeeta talks about grandmothers. Both of mine have died, for example. And I know that, my mom's generation, or the one right after that, are going to be grandmothers and grandfathers soon. They do not have the depth of knowledge anymore. It's eroding that quickly. Information access are of paramount importance. And part of the think tank that was set up at that time around millets was, how do you get this to proliferate at a grassroots level at a rapid pace? Because clearly in this race of development versus conservation, development is winning out. One of the suggestions was, why can it not be included into the midday meal program? Why can it not be included into the syllabus? Why do children not study about anything to do with agriculture, crops, biodiversity in school? Social media, of course, is the devil. I mean, I'm off as many platforms as possible. I find it an utter waste of time for myself. There's so many more productive things to do, but that has become the determinant of how people consume information. So, I think everybody who's in this space needs to be as savvy as those who are actually, popular today. Thomas, of course, has a great following on Instagram, and he's done, phenomenal work in the past few years in trying to popularize biodiversity and local vegetables. But this is the conversation that needs to be spoken by a lot more people. Celebrity endorsement is important beyond, let's say, the chefs and the food experts. You need the politicians, you need the cricketers, you need the Bollywood celebrities talking about this on a regular basis. So I think that's really the only counter that we'd found at that point of time, because it had become fairly evident that between industrial agriculture, between the amount of meat we're consuming now. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. I keep saying no one seems to talk about it. Netflix, ironically, is talking about it more than anyone else these days, and that's amazing. I think that's some of the best stuff that's hit streaming platforms. Is you are what you eat. That's the latest one that's like trending right now, and that's good. That's promising. At least someone's having that conversation. So perhaps mainstream media and everyone who is influential in some way needs to have this conversation more. And I think that's really where the change will start taking place. Otherwise, as Thomas said earlier, it'll be in silos.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Vibha, you want to add anything?
It's just very interesting to hear everyone. That gives us so many ideas. I will be in touch with you individually and get more ideas. I think it's just that we have been talking about this for so long, and it's so good to see it being implemented, because once, like, as a writer, I sometimes feel that it's just on a piece of paper. So that kind of dissuades me sometimes, but it's so nice to see that it is being used by people, by chefs, and so much more information is coming to actually help us eat better. And like, the world has so much to offer and we do so little, so we have to make an effort to actually find out more about it.
So let me wrap up, because we are out of time as well. And I know I have a very busy group of people. We've dragged you away from very tough jobs. So let me wrap up. I mean, so for me, Thomas, Manu, all of you have talked about, how we come together, what we do more. But I believe that there is huge changes that are happening. I mean, the fact is today, if I look at it, there are two big. I mean, global agriculture is in crisis, whether it is the farmers moving in tractors across the towns of Europe, or whether it's farmers at Delhi's doorsteps. Agriculture is in crisis. The way we are growing food is a problem today in the world, in the rich world, in our world. Secondly, the way we are eating food is a problem today. And that is something that is becoming more and more clear. I mean, Anumitra talked about what I wrote about meat. I mean, my position on meat clearly is that in a country like India, we need to talk about how we grow the meat. We need to talk about how much meat we eat. Meat per se is not bad. It's about how you grow it. Now, if you grow chemicalized meat by clearing large amounts of rainforest to grow your beef, you're clearly doing injustice to planet. If you eat the kind of meat and the quantities of meat that I'm not sure in India we're beginning to do that, but I see the data from China, across the US, I mean, that is bad for health. So it's clearly all about the food and the culture of food. And that's really where, in some senses, the story is becoming so powerful. And that's where all your role is so powerful. I mean, I'll be very frank with you, that when we started this, and Vibha started this, I think in 2013, Vibha was the first book, if I remember right, when you brought out the first volume of the book, and Sangeeta and you were writing in Down to Earth before that. It was like just some curious thing. And our entire focus was on how do we stop people in terms of the toxification of the environment. But soon we learned that unless you celebrate what is good, you make the links between that biodiversity in the wild and the biodiversity on your plate. Unless you respect that knowledge that brought you that biodiversity and the reason why you ate it, the season in which you ate it, how you cooked it, and that, of course, culture of food will evolve. You are all masters in creating new food out of the food that existed. But why we grew it, why we ate it is so important. And that respect, that knowledge comes together in being able to argue for the conservation of our of not just our culture, but really our biological diversity. There is nowhere on earth we are going to protect biological diversity in the world unless people like you are celebrated for the work that you do, because it's your work which is helping us all to learn more. And lastly, as at CSC, one of the things that I have to say I don't feel good about, but is the fact that I've always believed that the elite are resource illiterate. And that, I keep being asked, why do you speak in English? Why not Hindi? We do in Hindi as well. But, English for me is the resource illiteracy part of it, that you're very resource illiterate. But the fact is, Sangeeta, the elite also determine food culture, and it's important, therefore, for making sure that all your restaurants that serve people, when you put that food, that forgotten food, that link with biodiversity in your restaurant, when you put it in your blog, when you talk about it, it helps people to understand. And that culture of food will change, because at the end of the day, and it's amazing if you read about it, how quickly our culture of food has been changed to become that industrial food. We've literally moved within one generation to eating refined food and eating food which actually is not good for our health, not good for our environment. So I think that rebranding of food in some senses, which you're all doing, is really remarkable. And thank you so much for doing it. I can only tell you that the kind of comments that you have, and I wish I could read all of them, but you can see from the comments, there is so much interest. We need to make sure that we can keep this conversation going. And I think, Vibha, that really is something that we could play a role in. We cannot cook like you do. We cannot run restaurants like you do. We cannot be bloggers like you do, but we can try and keep this conversation going. We are environmentalists. For us, the job is to make people understand why your work is so important in a climate risk world. And that's the role that we will continue to play, and we will continue to scream as loudly as we can. And thank you for being there with us. And Anumitra, please come back to Delhi and open your restaurant again, because I'm dying to eat some food from you again. But and you, Thomas, and you, Manu, please don't leave us out of your food journeys. So look forward again for seeing all of you. And thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Sheetal. Thank you, Sangeeta, for being there and for helping us, for guiding us all, and for guiding many people across India in terms of making the right choice, in terms of learning to select wisely, but also to respect the knowledge that we are forgetting so fast. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vibha, for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.
See you soon.
Very
Bye.
nice to have you.